With over 20 years of experience as a pioneering mental health advocate and relationship therapist, Tunji has transformed the lives of countless individuals, families, and communities specializing in working with upwardly mobile individuals. Tunji utilizes a data-driven approach that integrates coaching, counseling, and psychological insights to address both life, mental health, and relationship goals. Tunji's method is anchored in an integrative coaching model, offering clients a holistic, helicopter view of their mental and relational well-being. This bird's-eye perspective allows Tunji to see beyond surface issues, delving into root causes and delivering comprehensive solutions tailored to individual needs. By merging evidence-based therapy techniques with intuitive coaching strategies, Tunji helps clients unlock their potential, heal from trauma, cultivate emotional intelligence, and build healthy, lasting relationships.
I welcome you so dearly. And all right, to jump into my conversation today, in this webinar, I want you to know that we're deep diving into, the silent transformation, that shape our well-being. So this is not just for me a conversation. This is for me an interaction that will help you, to understand why certain things happen to you better. I know that there are many people here who perhaps had listened to something about mental health, but I always say to people that there is a difference between knowledge and understanding. I used to have a protege who scored, he scored A in CRK, Christian Religious Knowledge, but just doesn't know who Jesus is. So it's one thing to, score well in his subject. It's another thing to understand it. So I would attempt for you to, ride on what, the former speaker said, just to re-echo some of the things she has said, to help you recognize the unseen patterns that, may be sabotaging your mental peace. That's what I call the mental peace. I would also attempt to maybe share with you a few powerful tools, that will help you build emotional resilience and will help you cope with life challenges. In a way, we would also dive deeper to cultivate deeper, healthier relationship with ourselves and with others. I was in a session earlier today, and a particular lady said to me, he said, "Coach, please, I have a challenge trusting people." I said, well, the issue with trust is not with other people first. The issue with trust is first trusting yourself. So for you to be able to trust others, you have to first be able to retrust yourself, if there's any word like that. So this is not just a conversation, it's a journey. It's a journey into understanding. It's a journey into healing. It's a journey into thriving. I'm hoping that by the end of our time together, you will have, taken with you a renewed perspective and also take with you actionable insights, usable thoughts, so you can take control of your mental health at the end of it all. I often always like to say that mental health is not a destination, but it's a process. It's about how you thrive. It's about how you drive, and it's about where you are going. It's not about where you are. And also, I always like to say that healing isn't just a destination. Also, healing, it doesn't just mean that the damage never existed. All right. It means the damage no longer controls your life. All right. I want to say that again. So typically in Africa, an average person has gone through one traumatic event or something that happened that had probably, just like the former speaker said, caused either a short-term impact or a long-term impact on you. So most time I see people just want to approach mental health issue as, okay, now I have mental. No, there's nobody that has mental health. It's a continuous. So like I said earlier, healing doesn't just mean the damage never existed. It means that damage does not control or doesn't have control over your life again. Also, I like to say that your mental health is worth fighting for. So whatever it is that is not serving your mental health, you need to take a second look at it. How do I define trauma? So for me, I like to say that trauma is the emotional, the psychological response to distress, okay, or disturbing events. So trauma is the emotional and psychological response to distress or disturbing events. And the events range from not even having a healthy relationship with your mom or your dad to maybe you lost your sister early, you lost your mom at a tender age. So trauma also is not just what happens to you, it's how you have experienced and processed it. Okay? Quickly, I won't flog that for too long. There are different types of trauma for the people on this call. It would be just to mention it. So there is what I call acute trauma. You know, that's a single distressing event, maybe an accident, a job loss, you know, someone broke your heart, someone promised you marriage, got married to someone else. You know, so that's acute trauma. There's also what we call the chronic trauma. That's a prolonged exposure to stressors, like working with a toxic boss, working in a toxic environment, when you're in an abusive relationship, um, you know, so that's chronic trauma. There's also what we call complex trauma. In other words, there's multiple repeated traumatic experiences. For example, childhood neglect. It can be an example of complex trauma, you know, and many people don't understand that when there's childhood neglect, it has an impact on their, you know, sense of safety, on their love, the basic human needs, you know. So I'm going to mention that again. There's acute trauma. That is a single distressing event, accident, job loss. There's chronic trauma. You know, that talks about exposure to stressors like toxic bosses, toxic workplaces, abusive relationships, parents with, you know, maybe an environment of dysfunctionality. Then there's also complex trauma, repeated trauma, traumatic experiences. One of the first clients I had early this year was a lady who had been raped multiple times. You know, that's an example of complex trauma. All right. Quickly, also, it will be good to let you know how does trauma affect us. So when we've gone through traumatic, whether it's complex, through chronic, or acute, we oftentimes know the effect of trauma first on our mind. So we start to struggle with anxiety, overthinking, burnout. If I want little signs, so I'm going to mention a few things that will help you. When you find someone who exaggerates their pain, it's a sign of trauma. For example, now maybe your friend was coming to visit you and they were in a bus that a bike hit from behind. No impact, nothing really happened. By the time he gets to your house, you say, you don't even know what happened today. Hmm. God save me, oh. Trailer jam our bus. I'm like, it takes someone who was there to say, it was just a bike that hit the back of the bus you were in. All right. So when you see people who amplify, who exaggerate their pain, um, you know, then some other people they feel stuck despite career or personal achievement. They still have a feeling that they're stuck. That's what happens to the mind. For the body, people who are either experiencing acute, chronic, or complex trauma, they sometimes you know, encounter fatigue, headaches, unexplainable pain. Some of them have issues with sleeping. They have change in appetite. And when I say appetite, it's not only for food. Appetite for, you know, the opposite sex. Appetite for, I mean, different things. Also, trauma and relationship. So when you, not all the time, but there are times when people have difficulty in trusting others or difficulty in setting boundaries, you know. Then how does trauma affect our relationship? When people overreact to minor conflicts, you know, it also be a sign that they are struggling with trauma. Let's also look quickly about into the science behind trauma. Now, what happens usually when someone has, you know, either gone through acute complex or the three-kind trauma, is that trauma activates the flight or the freeze response. All right. Now, the flight or the freeze response leading to chronic stress. Now, the brain's amygdala, the other speaker spoke about the brain also, the alarm system. So the amygdala is the alarm system. It becomes overreactive, all right? While the prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of the brain, is less now effective. And I'm going to go over that again. So when someone has gone through a traumatic incident, the brain's amygdala, which is the alarm system, all right, becomes overreactive. So while the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational thinking, is less effective. Okay? So when there is unresolved trauma, is now stored in the body. It now begins to create physical and emotional symptoms. Now, it would also help the people on this call to know what are the signs, you may be carrying trauma. What are the signs that you haven't healed from the trauma that happened to you during your childhood? Or, there's a way we talk our way out of, our realities, because I found out that many people just don't like to admit that they've had traumatic incidences, So what are the signs that you may be carrying trauma? Sometimes frequent feelings of being overwhelmed. Sometimes when you find people who just want to numb, conversations that perhaps will trigger their, making them feel a bit uncomfortable. Some other people, so it's not a one size fits all. Some people, some of the things I've said will just be one that will apply to them. Some of them will be three out of what I've said. So I'm just broadening the conversation in a way that everyone fits into the conversation. So I mentioned frequent feelings of being overwhelmed, numbness. Some people have difficulty focusing or making decisions, avoiding people, places, or activities that remind them of a past event. I don't have time to share. Maybe I should just share this quickly. I used to have a client many years ago. In fact, the first child now is about 7 years. Just to stories buttress points. So permit me to share the story, with their consent. This particular couple, they just, signed up and wanted me to do there was marital distress. So they signed up for marital distress products and we started the sessions. And one of the high points for the husband was the fact that the wife just doesn't enjoy sex. So by the time we started digging deep, asking them open-ended questions, hearing what they were saying and what they weren't saying, I just got a light bulb moment in one of the sessions. So the lady said, I was raped serially when I was young. I said, oh, so we dig down and we found out which one was the most significant out of everything. He said, there's a particular one. I said, can you describe the person? She said, oh, the person, all she can remember was the guy was wearing a red boxers. Oh, okay. All right. Then I remember that the husband had told me that he was a Man U fan. So everything around the house was white and red. The curtain, the steering of the car, the throw pillows. And for those of you who understand the power of colors, all I needed to do was, okay, can we do an experiment? And they were comfortable enough. So we got to a point where part of the actions from the session was to do a makeover of their house. Can we do away with anything that's white and red? Boom. They did away with white and red curtains. And for the first time in their 3 or 4 years of marriage, she enjoyed sex very well. You know what has happened? The brain stores up incidences and files it up in a way that's looking for what we call confirmation bias. So for her, that red was a trigger. That's why I said when activities remind you of a past event, the next morning they started calling me very early. They're like, coach, what was the magic? I said, the psychology of colors. The color was it made a significant impact on her mind that anything white and red, And she also reminded me that when her dad passed and they were picking Ashwebi, she just kept saying to everyone, I don't want any Ankara that has red in it. I don't want any Ankara that has red in it. Now, that's how powerful incidents in our life could be if we don't deal with them, So some of you don't like certain colors and you don't even know why. but of course, it might not always be everyone that is raped, but I'm just using that as an example. Then, when people constantly strive for perfection or approval to feel safe, so when you find people pleasing, when you find people constantly striving for perfection, if things are not perfect, they won't step into it. It's got flavors of not being healed from trauma. Having said that, I came up with an acronym before I go into the simple steps to understand trauma. Probably just want to share. So I came up with an acronym to just help you understand it. If you're writing, just write ECHO, ECHO, ECHO. All right. E stands for events. All right. So, like I mentioned in my definition, remember I've been mentioning past events. So when there is an event that has distorted thinking, that had caused, either short-term impact or long-term impact, then C talks about the context by which that person had perceived the event. Okay? And then H talks about, there's what we call homeostatic balance. All right? Then the O talks about the outcomes. ECHO, event, context, homeostatic balance, and the outcome from the event. I often like to say that it's not what happened to you that is the problem, it's your interpretation of what happened to you that is the problem. All right? Because I've seen twins lived in the same house, had a very abusive father. One turned out well, the other turned out badly. And that also speaks of our resilience. So there can be two people involved in the same accident. One could turn out and just feel like, oh, nothing happened, sleep and snore the same night that accident happened. Another person in that same car could come out of that accident saying he's got a nightmare. All right. And how we build our resilience is also a function of the kind of parenting style, because there's what we call co-regulation. For the primary caregivers, who I call the parents or aunties and uncles, we owe children the responsibility to help them understand how to regulate their emotions. All right. So whatever they find as a culture in the house will be the default way by which they regulate their emotions. All right. So sometimes love, safety, those three those three primary needs of every human being, love, safety. There is one of my favorite sessions in my therapy session is overcoming childhood trauma, digging back into the past and helping them understand why they act the way they act and the things that they're doing and all of that. So when we talk about the homeostatic balance, it's about how our nervous system changes our beliefs, how our nervous system changes our behavior, how our nervous system help us develop behavior to cope, or that we develop as a response to the things that has happened to us. Quickly, 6 simple steps to understand trauma. Number 1, you need to acknowledge it. If you cannot name an emotion, you can't tame it. So understand that trauma is not a weakness or a failure. It's a human response. I always like to emphasize that. All right. So acknowledge it, that at some point of my life, I lost my dad, or I lost my brother, I lost my sister, and that event was traumatic. Unfortunately, has caused a long-term effect on me. All right. If you can't name it, you can't tame it. Yeah. I'd like to share stories. So I have been involved in conflict resolution and resolving conflict for 2 people. And I'm not sure whether anyone here can testify to this, or you've been there before. So we are saying, okay, please, Ayo, please don't be upset again. Then she starts shouting, I'm not upset, oh, I'm not upset. I'm not upset. The people should not misunderstand me. I'm not upset. And she's raising her voice and she's telling you she's not upset. Everything about her connotes that she's upset, but she's in denial. Guess what will happen? If one of our values, because the reason why we're hurt, we're upset, is because our values are either validated or violated. When our values are validated, we're happy. When our values are violated, we're hurt, we're sad, and all of that. So your emotion is a pendulum between the validation of your values and the violation of your values. So on that particular incident, if that incident happened again and one of our triggers are, switched on again, she would respond the same way she did the last time because she was living in denial. All right. So when people live in denial, they often be in I call it a loop, that emotional loop. They will just respond to the same thing the same way because they have not been able to name the emotion so they can tame it. Number two, recognize your triggers. Identify situation, people, environment that bring discomfort or distress. I've had another client also who perfume is a trigger. You know, they had a armed robbery attack, and the armed robber was wearing a particular perfume. The armed robber unfortunately molested her, sexually. So that left an impression on her psyche. So when she smells a particular kind of perfume, it's a trigger for her. Because you see, the just like the former speaker said, trauma affect the five senses in different ways. Our sense of touch, feel, see, the five senses. So for her, for that event, it was her smell. But when she got engaged, she kept saying to her boyfriend, please don't use this very strong perfume because it chokes me. It might not really be the choking, it might be just the fact that that incident registered, you know, very discomforting and distress feeling with her. Number three, you need to listen to your body. Notice physical cues like tension, rapid heartbeats, you know, shallow breathing. Listen to your body. You like I said, I hope that this session would help people gain awareness such that you will know exactly what the issues are. One of the tools I will leave with us is what we call, so when we haven't been able to, I've seen people ask about where do we get free sessions and all of that, but there are certain tools I'm going to share with us. So you can get relief from trauma by what we call practicing the grounding. There's what we call the grounding technique. And if you're writing this, will help you. Okay? The grounding technique is that ability for you to deep breathe, inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale it for 4 seconds. Okay? Deep breathing method. So maybe something triggered your memory again and it looks like you got into that panic attack or your heart is beating or you just notice that you are not emotionally comfortable. That deep breathing exercise will help you. Then there's also what we call the 5-4-3-2-1 method. So you would focus on 5 things you see. So as I'm seated here and I can see a pillow, I can see um winter jacket, I can see a box, I can see a dustpan, I can see a towel. Focus on 5 things, okay? 5 things you see, 4 things that you feel. So what can you feel? I can feel the surface of this table. I can feel my clothes. All right. 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you can taste. 5-4-3-2-1 method. Okay. Focus on 5 things you see wherever you're seated now. All right. 4 things you feel. Do you feel angry? Do you feel happy? Do you feel, Then 3 things you hear. All right. 2 things you smell. I can smell my body perfume. I can smell someone is trying to blend pepper in the kitchen. 1 thing you can taste. All right. Now, those are techniques that can help you get relief. Then also, it's good for you to build a support system. The colleague that spoke before me mentioned that, talking to a trusted friend, family member, talking to a therapist, joining a group, community, they will help. Then, of course, seeking help from a therapist, using CBT. Then also, it will not be out of place for me to mention, steps to long-term healing. One of it is prioritize your self-care. Schedule time for hobbies, relaxation, physical activity, especially when you know what comfort has the other side. The more comfortable you are, the more you begin to live a sedentary lifestyle. While you're sitting in your car, you're sitting, and sitting has become the next cancer because many people are not just doing physical activities again. So when you find out that you're not just in that emotional state, research has found out that, walking helps out, gives you a clear perspective to your world, help you. There's what we call, which I'll also make a point, make sure you take a dose of dose. Doctors will tell you take 3 tablets every day. I always like to say that take a dose of dose. The dose is an acronym for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So every day, take a dose of those, do a workout, hug someone, okay? Shake hands, spend time with loved ones. They are called the feel-good hormone. So set a timetable to, have a flavor of the dose, because they will help your mental health. All right? Then also, it's important for you to learn to set healthy boundaries. Learning to say no without guilt. It's going to help you a great deal, especially when you find out that the person you are around is not, what they say do is not promoting your mental health. I hear someone say, okay, what if I'm married to someone who does not promote mental health? Your case, you need to see Precious so you can sign up for a session. You need, real good help, Then also it's good for you to practice journaling. Journaling has been a powerful tool, that helps you process emotions safely. Journaling will help you process emotions very safely. You'll be shocked until you start to journal. You don't even know the patterns around your thoughts. All right. Then also, I always recommend to regularly evaluate your emotional and mental health goals. You need to set them and regulate them. Beg your pardon. So what are my mental health? The year is running to an end. Don't just start 2025, with regular goals. Set emotional and mental health goals. All right. Then also, I always like to mention, so people are asking, so why is it that you're always talking about mental health? Because I believe that freeing yourself from the past rather, allows you to step fully into your potential. Because, when you heal from, past events, when you take time to prioritize your mental health, it will help you build stronger relationship, because healing builds trust, healing builds empathy, healing builds connection. Then I also found out that people who pay attention to their mental health, or find healing from their trauma, there's enhanced productivity, there's reduced stress, which improves your focus and your decision making. I think finally it would be good to also mention that trauma does not define you. It's something you've experienced. It's not who you are. With the right tools, you can heal, you can grow, you can thrive. And I want to leave this last note that remember, seeking help is a sign of strength and not a sign of weakness. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful.